Welcome back to the Valentine Show, guys. I'm your host, Valentine, expecting you guys are having a wonderful and blessed day. On today's show, we have a treat. We're going to have and let me clear this up. This is not a debate. This is not, nobody's going to destroy anybody. None of that stuff is happening here today. What we're going to be having is a conversation in between two human beings, which sadly is lacking today in society. People who share different opinions are not able to live together, basically. On today's show, I have a YouTuber that, by the magic of YouTube, right? The algorithm, the YouTube algorithm. I saw one of his videos on his channel regarding the war on drugs. He is a Christian YouTuber, and the guy is amazing. His content is great, and we're here. Actually, go watch that video after you've done this one, obviously. Regarding the war on drugs, you're gonna learn a lot. Again, he does a great job. Mr. Ruslan is here with me today.
Yes,
How you doing today, brother?
Doing good, man. Excited to talk to you, Valentine.
Yeah, that sounds great. I thank you so much for accepting the invite to have a conversation. Again, I enjoyed that video that I saw, and you have top-notch content. But let's get into it right away, and let's talk about a little bit. What is the war on drugs for the people that don't know? What exactly happened in the United States? Do you mind explaining a little bit on it?
The late 80s, excuse me, the early 80s saw a huge influx of a new drug in the United States called crack cocaine. Crack cocaine was a very potent drug that had a really high and had a very low big crash afterwards. And so what happened was you had an influx of this influx of cocaine hitting a lot of inner city areas, specifically South Central here in California. And, you know, in terms of the economic climate, where it wasn't the best economic climate for a lot of minorities, you saw drug use, illicit drug use go way up. You saw addiction go up. You saw mental health issues go up. And in an attempt to mitigate that, Ronald Reagan, who was president at the time, decided to launch this war on drugs to, quote unquote, you know, get the bad guys out. And in the process, you started having these wild disparities where you have the 100-to-1 crack versus coke disparity sentencing, you know, meaning it was 100x the sentence for the same amount of coke versus crack.
Which is basically the same exact chemical, right?
Right. Same drug, but African Americans, Latinos were more likely to use the crack version of the drugs. Wealthier white people were using the cocaine version of the drug, the powdered version of the drug. And so you just saw a huge disparity in terms of crime going up, them attempting to do something about it, and then in them attempting to do something about it, a lot of Black people going to prison because of the war on drugs, not just like going to rehab or therapy, where now we have like the, what do they call it? The opioid crisis, the opioid pandemic that, you know, you need treatment. Back then it was, you needed to go to jail and never come out. Right. And so you had the byproduct that is just really harsh sentences for kind of petty drug crimes. And it impacted a lot of people. It impacted a lot of people. Specifically, it impacted my father-in-law. It impacted other people that I grew up with who had done drug related time for kind of petty drug offenses. And so that was in the 80s, war on drugs. It bled into the 90s. And then in 2010, President Obama passed the Fair Sentencing Act, which reduced the disparity from 100-to-1 to 18-to-1.
Okay.
And that's a basic breakdown of the war on drugs.
Where this influx of this new drug, where does it come from, in your opinion? There's conspiracy theories out there saying that the CIA literally did it themselves and they allowed it themselves. Some say that the CIA turned a blind eye to it. And then you get the whole contrast involving Nicaragua. Where do you think, in your opinion, again, this is just an opinion, where do you think it came from, these drugs?
Well, we know the cocaine could be traced back to Colombia, right?
Okay. That's facts.
Yeah. So we know that for a fact. Now, how did such a huge influx come here, and who was responsible for it? Who was complicit in it? Was there a conspiracy? I think there's a wide range of views. Some people take the extreme and say, the federal government, they wanted this to happen, and therefore they flooded the streets with cocaine so that people can get addicted to drugs. They wanted to basically, hurt their own people. I don't know if I believe that. I don't think I believe that, where it was intentional, maliciously, intentionally trying to hurt Black and brown neighborhoods. What I think was happening is Gary Webb and others have came out, Freeway Ricky Ross, Gary Webb. Basically, they were fighting. Ronald Reagan wanted to fight communism, but he couldn't just fight communism without the Senate's approval. And after Vietnam and getting out of Vietnam, they were like, listen, we're not just going to keep meddling in other countries' affairs. So these Nicaragua Contras needed funding. We know the Iran-Contra deal happened. They admitted that, openly came out and said, yes, we were selling illegal guns through Iran and Israel to the Contras. That came out undeniable. We can all look at that.
That's
right?
fact.
So then the question becomes, who funded this stuff? How was the government funding this stuff? How were these Contras funded? And Gary Webb's writings were that the government wasn't directly bringing the cocaine over, but they knew about it. At the very least, they knew about it. They affiliated with some of these drug traffickers. They knew it was happening. They did nothing to stop it because it was in the federals, specifically Ronald Reagan's best interest to fund these Contras to fight communism in Nicaragua. That is the theory. I think there's a good amount of evidence to suggest that the CIA at least knew and did nothing about it. Now, we don't know for sure. I don't know for sure. I wasn't there. I didn't watch the CIA look the other way while the cocaine was brought over. But I would say most people who've looked at his writings, most people who've looked at the other people involved would say, hey, there's a good amount of precedent to say that at the very least, the CIA knew and did nothing about it.
Okay. Explaining the Iran-Contra deal for the people that don't know, the Iran-Contra deal is an issue that happened in Iran. It started in Iran with some hostages that they were taken by the Iranians, right? So
yes.
To get the hostages, the Reagan administration agreed to pay, I think, was a payout of $30 million in exchange for weapons to the Iranians in exchange for the hostages. At that same time, there was an amendment passed, I think, if I'm not mistaken, you might correct me on this, it's called the Boneland Amendment, where it prohibited the United States government from funding the Contras in Nicaragua, which was, again, a right-wing revolutionary group against the Sandinistas in Nicaragua. Again, this guy, Reagan, is trying for communism not to spread everywhere in the world and in the Western Hemisphere, especially in the same side that the United States is at. So a way around this was that let's take some of this money that we were going to send for the hostages, which was approved by Congress, which was like $30 million. Let's only give them $11 million for the weapons to the Iranians, and that other 18, we're going to give it to the Contras, right? So that's where the whole thing just blows up right from there on. So they find out that the Reagan administration diverted $18 million to the Contras in Nicaragua to fight this war against communism. You mentioned the disparity of 100 to 1. That people understand and make it like you made it clear on your video. The 100 to 1 disparity was if you got caught with 500 grams of powder cocaine, you got the same sentence as somebody caught with only 100 grams of crack cocaine. This affected more Black and brown communities. In your opinion, why is the disparity?
I think there's a couple of reasons. I think the one reason is you don't count the cost. They didn't count the cost on how this would affect poor people, right? So you're talking about and this is where I think historically there is this flippant nature towards people of color, not like today, but like if we look at the history of how certain laws can impact certain groups differently. And we could say, oh, well, that's not a racist law. It's just, it's crack versus coke. Crackheads are more violent than cokeheads. Crackheads are more poor than cokeheads. So we want those people out of society and in jails, while saying, well, listen, while ignoring the fact that saying, well, listen, the majority of these people are already poor. They're already experiencing poverty. They're probably using drugs because they're in poverty, or because there's a lack of economic opportunity, or because there's some form of mental illness. So they're discardable. They're not as important, as significant. So we don't care if it comes down harsher. We're not counting the cost on it. So I think it's not like malicious intent. I don't know if it's malicious intent or it's just incompetence and not factoring in all the variables and being flippant about how this could affect a people group very negatively. So why do I think there's this huge disparity? I think there's a variety of reasons. I think the root of it is black and brown people, doesn't really matter. They don't earn as much overall. They don't matter as much. They tend to be more poor. So what does it matter if we come down harder on them than people who are using coke?
So
considering that most people who use coke.
So you're saying
I think race is a factor. But to be fair, there was also black people and black leaders and black ministers who also wanted some of these harsher drug sentences, specifically with Bill Clinton and the super predators thing, which Hillary came out and apologized for, right? There were black conservative, well, I don't know if you would call them conservatives, but like black people who were like, yeah, we want harsher sentences. And again, I don't think they factored in what the cost of that was going to be to fathers, to husbands, right? To people who are already down and out, and now they're going to prison for longer, where in my opinion, they really should be getting treatment. Like if somebody's an addict, you don't put them in prison, you get them treatment. I don't care if it's crack, coke, alcohol, food, right? Hoarding. If somebody's an addict, they need treatment, they need therapy, they need counseling. They don't need prison, in my opinion. This is just my opinion.
On that same topic, why would Obama sign into law the 18-1 disparity? A black president, still a disparity of 18-1. It's not fair. Why will he sign that into law?
I think maybe that was the best that they could get it down to in terms of a reasonable number that everybody could agree on. Or it was, again, going back to, well, people who use the crack form of the drug tend to be poor and more violent. Maybe the way the drug hits them tends to be more violent. Or maybe, hey, this is the best we can get. We can get it down from 100-1 to 18-1. I think there's a potentially a variety of reasons. I'm not quite sure. I don't know what his thinking was. I didn't have a conversation with him. I think he was doing the very best he could at the time to level this disparity in sentencing.
I was, in my short time that I did researching, I was able to find that only one article which was published in Esquire magazine, and it's called Say Hello to Ricky Ross, published September 25th, 2013. And I'm going to just quote you. Why do they believe is the disparity? In 1986, when homicide rates due to gang warfare across the country had reached all-time highs, mandatory federal sentencing minimums were established, making the penalties for possession of crack by weight 100 times more punitive than for those possession of powder cocaine. So because of the craziness that was surrounding the crack epidemic and the murder rate that was happening, they decided to, in my opinion, take these drastic measures and do what they have to do. But let me, and this is going to venture a little bit into what we're going to get more later on. Knowing that the sentence is so harsh, why would you traffic crack cocaine or drugs in general?
Say that one more time, boss. You cut out for just a second.
No problem. Knowing that the sentence is so harsh, right, regarding this drug, right, so unfair when you compare it to the other ones, why would you traffic in this drug?
I wouldn't traffic this drug, right? And I don't think that drug was, I don't think that sentencing disparity is just for people who traffic the drug. I think we could also apply that same 100-1 disparity to people who use the drug and maybe had 5 grams of crack on them. So we got to be sure not to go and just say, well, this is only to punish the dealers. No, this was punishing users. Let's be clear about that. And some users were dealers Some dealers weren't users, some users weren't dealers, and this came down on everybody. So let's not just say this is only to punish the hard criminals, because if you got to remember, if you're a high level drug trafficker like Freeway Ricky Ross was, he never touched crack. He never went near crack. What was he peddling? He was selling the Colombian coke, which according to him was being allowed in by the CIA, and he was selling really, really high volumes. He's making $200,000 a day. You don't do that selling crack rock. You do that selling kilos of cocaine, lots and lots of them.
Actually, there was even a time I think he sold, I think 13. There's 13 million, I think it was, in one day.
It's insane. That's insane. So again, the guys who are causing the most amount of damage are selling the powdered version, not the crack version, if we're talking on a macro level. Now on a micro level, yes, if there's a gang and they want this side of the street and there's turf, right? Yeah, then those guys are probably selling the rock form of the version. That's neither here nor there. Why would anybody break any laws? Why would anybody break any laws? That's the bigger question. I think there's a variety of reasons for them, right? So we could talk about specifically with drugs. Why would people use drugs? Well, according to the studies, most people who are addicts usually have experienced some degree of trauma, have some degree of mental illness, or some degree of despair, whether that's economic or that's inner turmoil that they're happening. That's by and large, the majority of users of any type of drug or substance abuse of any kind. And this extends to food, which, hello, America, want to talk about people abusing food, extends to hard drugs, cocaine, so on as alcohol, right? Some of these things are viewed more acceptable by society. Some of them are harsher on your body. So I would say people are using drugs usually out of despair, out of trauma, out of some degree of mental illness, trying to self-medicate themselves. For example, somebody that's bipolar may be more likely to use marijuana, right? And they're trying to level themselves out. I don't think that's good. I think you should get help if you have mental illness, or if you have trauma, you should go to therapy, you should get some type of help. But I think by and large, that would be my assessment of growing up with addicts all across my family, having multiple family members that are functioning alcoholics, multiple friends that are on drugs, multiple friends with mental illness. It usually is rooted back to that. To answer your question about crime, I think crime usually, by and large, can be correlated to economic despair. People commit crimes when there's a lack of economic despair, and or the economic despair fuels a degree of groupthink and a social engineering of the culture. So starts with economic despair, then economic despair turns to groupthink, and now there's a gang culture, and kids that have both parents in the home and have a loving mother and father get sucked into that. But those aren't the kids that start gangs, right? Or start the criminal lifestyle.
But what would you tell me? For example, I've always been, I've lived my whole entire life, and to this day, I still live in the hood, and I never ever decided to take up that criminal life. Why is there there is a direct correlation between socioeconomic status and crime, 100%.
Yes.
Does there need to be, biblically standing, and as a Christian, do you believe that because you're poor, you need to commit crimes?
Of course not. I don't think anybody needs to commit crimes. I think there are certain variables that we all have in our lives that make us more likely to act out. For example, I didn't have my father in my life, right? I'm good with my father now, but my father wasn't in my life. Therefore, I acted out as a child. I got arrested at the age of 11. I got in all kinds of trouble. I sold weed, right? I committed crimes. I was a derelict kid, but it was really because of the fact that my dad wasn't in my life. I experienced an amount of trauma, but thankfully I had a lifeline in that my mother, who was on welfare and was an alcoholic, still had enough foresight to move me out of the neighborhood that I was in, move me into a better neighborhood where I had less bad influences and I had less excess time to be a knucklehead, right? So I don't know why I could say why I personally stopped going down that path is because I had a mother that cared and pulled me out, but my mother also worked a lot. She wasn't around. She had to work nights. That's when I got in the majority of my trouble. What if my mother didn't see that and left us living in that neighborhood? I could potentially be in prison right now, right? I could potentially be in a really worse spot. So for you, I don't know. I don't know if you have both parents in your home. That's a huge variable. Do you have a loving father in your home? That's a huge variable. The religious and church support. I didn't have that. Maybe you had that growing up. There's so many variables to why people do or don't commit crime. I would say that there's also the degree of survivorship bias, right? Which I don't know if you've ever studied survivorship bias.
No, explain a little bit.
World War II, there was planes that would go out and they would come back, and some of these planes would be shot up. And so they were examining these planes and they were looking at where the bullet holes were, right? And they were like, oh man, wherever the bullet holes are, we should reinforce the armor around these bullet holes so that they're less likely to get shot up. And then a general mathematician, somebody stepped in and said, no, we're only looking at the planes that are coming back. We're not looking at the planes that crashed. So we're only looking at what survived. And then we're saying, well, look, this is what survived. And that means that we have to reinforce here. No, we should be thinking, why do these planes not come back? And place, where did the bullets go through there, right? So I think the logic of survivorship bias is saying, it's like the logic of saying stuff like, oh, when we were kids, we could sit in the car without a seatbelt and drive around in the back of the truck without a seatbelt. Nothing happened to us. Well, we survived it. That doesn't count for the millions of kids that died. You know what I'm saying? Because they did, right? And so I think we have to be careful with looking at ourselves as the survivors of these circumstances, right? And then saying, well, if Obama can do it, then anybody can do it. If Oprah made it, then anybody can make it. Well, people who didn't make it don't get paid to do YouTube videos and do speeches about how they failed in life, right? So our brains naturally transition to survival. It's an interesting concept. I recommend you to dig a little deeper into it in terms of human behavior.
What you explained makes perfect sense. And it makes perfect sense. But then some other people will say, like I said, I mean, I just take it back to my personal situation where I did grow up with a father and mother in my home. But I'm gonna tell you this, man, there's 5 of us, right? And every time there was problems in my house, it was Valentine and somebody, Valentine and this one, Valentine and that. I was a real problematic kid. I was really, really bad. It came to the point one time that I even asked my father to fight. Yo, let's go, let's fight. My father, I was like, what? I don't know, maybe 14, 15 years old. And mind you, all this coming from parents who raised us up Christian, right? That's the funny thing, that they raised us up Christian, but I was horrible. It was like I was raised, I don't know, by other parents or something like that. But to this day, thank God, I was just, you're young and you're stupid, right? You don't know what you're doing. You don't know what you're saying. Only you realize it when you get a little bit older. Let's get back to the contras, right?
I'm sorry. So to ask you a question, did you have a moment of like a coming to Jesus moment that kind of changed the trajectory of you being the derelict kid, or what was it in your life? Would you say that you have both parents at home, but you were still kind of like the kid that was acting out? What prevented you from being that kid?
I even though I was acting out and I wasn't a huge weed smoker, so I would smoke weed maybe, I don't know, a couple times during the year. Basically, I would drink and do what I had to do, whatever. I wasn't really a delinquent. I respected human beings. I respected everybody. I still I didn't, even though I was kind of what we Christians called in the world, I still didn't like cursing or anything like that. So I still, I guess those values still that were installed by my parents still did affect me in some way, even though it wasn't to what they wanted me to do. But it still did affect me in some way, that I did respect sanctity of life and other people's property, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's where I come from. And we're gonna get a little bit more about me. You're gonna know a little bit more about me.
Do you think if maybe your father wasn't in your life, that you could have your situation could have played out differently?
If my father wasn't in my life, who knows? Probably, because even though society wants to equate both, a mother is the same as a father, and a father is the same as a mother. That's not true. Children need both parents in the home. My mother, I remember, my mother, I made my mom a living hell. I made my mom a living hell. She couldn't with a boy. But when my father came around, I respected my father. Yeah, I was scared of my father. I was scared of the repercussions of my father. So if he wasn't around, who knows where I would have ended up. I did get into cars where people had drugs on them and all that stuff. Even though my parents told me, I still did these things, and no matter what, because I felt like I knew better. And so who knows, man? At the end of the day, I'm glad God was able to bring me back. But what really changed me, and I decided to go back to church, good 100%, was when my first daughter was born. When she was born, then things started getting real. Like there's another human being that depends from me, so I gotta do what I gotta do as a man. And then I went back to a lot of those lessons that my parents taught me. You gotta be a man, you gotta be a hardworking man, you gotta put food on the table, you gotta pay rent as a man, you gotta take care of your family, protect your family, etc., etc., etc. But going back to the conspiracy theory here on the CIA, right? Some people are like, they get like their minds get blown when they say that the United States is able to let something like this, like let drugs infiltrate the U.S. I mean, I haven't seen the compelling evidence yet, so I can't say. But do I doubt something like this can potentially happen? Well, let me tell you about what has happened 100%. For example, Operation Northwoods. Have you heard about that one?
I haven't heard about Northwoods. I mean, maybe I've heard about it. Nothing comes to mind.
Operation Northwoods was an operation by the CIA where they literally planned to assassinate Cuban immigrants and to potentially assassinate and kill United States citizens in false flags attacks in the 1960s to be able to justify some type of military intervention in Cuba or something like that. This was I mean, everybody could look it up. It's out there. Operation Northwoods. Another one that was released actually when, I don't know if you remember, maybe 2 years ago probably, when Donald Trump released some papers regarding the JF Kennedy assassination. You remember that?
Mm-hmm. I don't remember.
About 2 years ago, he also said that in those papers were plans for the U.S. to buy, for example, I'm guessing Russian MiGs, right? And Russian planes to do a false flag on U.S. allies or the U.S. themselves to justify military action against then the Soviet Union. This was again under Kennedy. And this was published like 2 years ago. You find there's a story on Newsweek. I might put a link when I finish here that way you guys could see. So like I don't doubt, and I don't even like talking about these stories too much, to be honest, because I don't like naysaying my country. You get what I'm saying? Like I don't like giving a bad international view of the United States. Like you're naysaying your family. Like why would you do that? Even though you know your family is not perfect, why would you say that? So is the U.S. Definitely possible of something doing something like this? I believe so, but I don't think that the U.S., especially Ronald Reagan, would want to fund the Contras in Nicaragua and yet find himself in this huge problem that that they found themselves in the U.S. with these war on drugs. I'm gonna tell you once we go into point number 3, where I'm from the Dominican Republic and where we landed when we came into New York and the neighborhoods that I lived in. Changing topics a little bit, reparations. Again, this is from a video that Mr. Ruslan put up on his YouTube channel, where we're gonna be giving his information in just a while, in a bit. You mentioned you try to equate the whole type, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. The war on drugs was something that is almost equatable to African Americans in the United States receiving reparations. Do you agree in the reparations for African Americans in the U.S.?
To answer it simply, yes. Mm-hmm. I do agree with reparations. I don't know the best way to go about paying out reparations. What are the best systems for reparations? The video you're referencing is a video I made reacting to an Andrew Scholl's Charlemagne the God video, where they break down the need for reparations, not just because of slavery, which was 150 years ago, but for the continued systemic denial to Black people to own private property, have private property rights, to build wealth, to attain assets. So Andrew Scholl's video was like, you can say that because of slavery, you know, people should get reparations, which there are corporations around today that you can Google that have benefited from slavery. But his argument was, we don't even need to go into slavery. We can just look at the apartheid that African Americans lived under up until 50, 60 years ago, right? And so the point of my video was to say, yes, we could do that, or we could even take it a little closer and say, well, what about the disparities in these drug laws of the 80s on top of potentially the CIA, and I never said President Ronald Reagan personally knew. I do think that in government, there's very much so a Machiavellian philosophy, which I'm not sure if you've ever looked at Machiavelli or his views, but there's a view of the ends justify the means. So it's not that they're intentionally, again, it's really tough to describe intent to something, right? But it's that listen, we got to do this messy thing. We got to do this reckless thing. Why? Well, because we got to stop the spread of communism by any means necessary. And the president doesn't even need to know that this is happening. We're just going to do it. You know what I mean? We're just going to do it. Because the ends justify the means. So to your point, I do think there's a history of that throughout our government, right? Throughout the CIA, throughout whoever. And it's not to badmouth the government. It's in the same way to say, hey, I'm a Christian. I love Jesus. And I am willing to go to the ends of the earth to tell people about Jesus. But at the same time, when somebody brings up, the Crusades, if somebody brings up the Protestant Reformation, when somebody brings up whatever, a good Christian isn't going to say, we're not going to talk about that. That's stupid. We're not going to talk about that. Then we're going to say, hey, yeah, those things were done. And they actually didn't even reflect the values of Jesus. So these things that were done by the CIA actually don't even reflect the values of the pursuit of life, liberty, and justice for all. They're actually contrary to the very values that America stands for, which was Martin Luther King's case for why we needed civil rights. It's like, hey, you guys are saying this is the pursuit of life, liberty, and justice for all, but we're not actually living it out. We need to change these laws so that everybody can be afforded the right of our actual values. I think that would be the critique. It's not to say America's evil. I don't believe America's evil. I don't believe capitalism is evil. I believe we fall short of the values that we claim to represent when it comes to Black communities.
I actually didn't see that video regarding Andrew's source that you're mentioning. I actually just took it from the one that you were talking about, the war on drugs, where you mentioned reparations and the war on drugs.
There's three different videos. They all kind of connect together. Sorry.
Okay. Nice. So thank you for letting me know. I'll probably check them out and see. But I find a problem with reparations. I think reparations is... I'm gonna tell you, look, this is the only reparation. I do agree with a certain form of reparations, but not the reparations that most people are talking about, which is a monetary one. And I'm just curious why it stands at monetary. I'm gonna tell you the story. I saw on the Breakfast Club the most comprehensive plan for reparations anybody has talked to. Everybody ends at reparations. And they always end at, but we don't know how to give them out, or we don't know how to give them out, or something like that. But let me tell you what T.I. said. T.I. said this. They identified a company in England. It's called, I don't know if you heard about this, Lloyd's of London, it's called. What they are is that they are an insurance company. And they were operating when the transatlantic trade route was operating, right? So what they did was essentially they insured the cargo meaning Black African slaves from Africa, right? That were taking that were obviously taken by the white man to bring over to America. But something that doesn't get mentioned too much either is also sold by Africans to the white man also to bring to America. So Africans also have a negative impact on the slave trade also. Continue on the T.I. story. He says that since this company insured this cargo, meaning slaves, they were able to build up their resources. Right now, they're like $1 billion company. He said, because this company was involved in this trade, we are asking that company to give 10% of the worth of the company to African Americans. And but not only that, he also said that that company should also, and that was 10% of the company's profits in perpetuity, meaning until the company operates forever. And then he also said for that company to give a $1 million loan at 1% to every single black African American in the United States. That was his plan. Sounds great. That's an actual plan, to be honest. People talking about actual money here. But where I find the problem as a Christian is, if we're going to give reparations, why do we stop at the money part? Why not give the land back? Why not send Valentine to the Dominican Republic, Rustlin to Russia, and everybody else, and give the land back to the Native Americans? Why stop at the money part? Question.
Well, I mean, you're talking about T.I. writing reparation policy.
No,
like,
no, but,
I don't know, man.
but believe it or not, that is the most comprehensive one. I found nobody ever speaks to
there's other ones. Yeah, there's other ones. Asheville, North Carolina just passed a form of reparation.
But they didn't
right?
say anything. They didn't say anything. That was just like a saying kind of thing. That was like a figure of speech.
No, they put money. They put money into specific communities. They are building up infrastructure in specific areas. Listen, so let's just say that there's two extremes, right? One extreme would be cash checks, right? And then there's another bill, I think, in Congress that's like $300,000 per family or something like that, right? Or there was a proposal, and then the other extreme would in terms of reparations would be what's happening in North Carolina, Asheville, North Carolina, where they would call it a reparation or a form of reparation. However, I don't know if that's a true reparation or not. I don't know. I am not like a skilled economist. I don't know how this would all be set up. To your question, why don't we all just go back to where we came from? Is that the real question?
Meaning, if we're gonna reparations is to, but the whole thing of reparation is we're trying to undo the sins of our forefathers, right?
Yeah.
So if we're gonna do that, right, why do we stop at the money? Why don't we give the land back?
Well, we did. We gave Native Americans some reservations. That's not a reparation, but we did give them some of the land back and let them have autonomous governments called, I don't know if they're out there in New York, but we have a ton of them called reservations. So there's the Viejas reservation, there's these different reservations, and they can function autonomously with little oversight. So we did give some of the land back.
But it's not some. That's the thing. If we want to be fair, it has to be all of the land back. You get what I'm saying?
I mean, maybe. I don't know. I don't know if we want to be fair. Like according to you, but again, if Native Americans want all of the land back, then, I don't know. They need to take that up and create a whole thing for it. You know what I'm saying? I think that's the tough part about like conquest and all this stuff, right? Imperialism, conquesting, discovering land when there was already people on the land, right? It all becomes and now you're talking about generations later. I think natives got the short end of the stick. I think Mexico got the short end of the stick. I mean, half of the United States was Mexico initially, right? How far back you want to trace this stuff is very difficult.
That's what that's
I agree it's complicated. And I'm not necessarily advocating that there needs to be a cash reparation. I'm saying, why is the idea of a reparation, when we did it for the Japanese, when we tried to do it for the Native Americans with the reservations, why is even the idea such a preposterous idea that conservatives just go, that could never happen? Why? You know what I mean? I think that is very interesting to me.
Because I think the reason that is some conservatives find it preposterous is because the ones who are getting the benefits of these reparations are not the ones who went through the issue themselves, right? And a whole bunch of African Americans will argue that they said that they have never lived in a freer land than the United States. They don't know anything. Some of them would actually go and say, I'm actually glad my ancestors got taken from Africa and brought here on a slave ship because I'm able to be here in America right now. This is from African Americans themselves. And if we're gonna right the wrongs of history, we can't stop at the money part, and that's where everybody seems to stop there. No, let's give the money part. If the people that suffer slavery will still be alive today, I mean, to be honest, I think, and I'll say it, I think it will be racist of somebody to be against reparations if the ones receiving the reparations were the ones directly affected by them. You get what I'm saying? Like when they freed the slaves, when the Emancipation Proclamation was given and Juneteenth happened and all these things, when slavery was officially abolished in the United States. If somebody was to come out and say, oh, you know what, we're going to give you guys Alabama, Mississippi, and all these 3 states, these are for you guys, to you guys, we did something wrong. I mean, I don't think that would be preposterous, in my personal opinion. But you're talking about who knows how many generations after slavery has ended.
Yeah.
And we are gonna give money. First of all, money that belongs to the government, and not even to the government, but to the people. So, for example, somebody right now today will be paying for reparations that who knows if even a white person in his family ever even owned slaves. So it will be kind of unfair. You get what I'm saying? And I think that's where there's a lot of
listen, I think the logic of that though is that reparations are only for slavery. So first of all, let me be very clear. This is not me speaking on behalf of Black people or Black issues. This is me speaking on behalf of my opinion as Ruslan, and that's it. So again, the video that I did, there was multiple videos, but the specific one I'm talking about is that there's a better argument for reparations, not just for slavery that was 150 years ago, but that everything that happened after slavery, which created, and I know conservatives hate this word, a systemic issue that prevented Black people from acquiring wealth. And when they did acquire wealth and they built Black Wall Street, it was burnt to the ground and no one was ever held accountable. Right. So I think that is the issue, is like, we're not talking about just slavery. I think that's a whole other conversation. We're talking about stuff that happened 50, 60 years ago. Right. We're talking about people being prevented from buying houses in certain neighborhoods, people being prevented from getting loans. And we know, and I'm sure as you do as somebody that's financially literate, home ownership is the fastest way to pass down generational wealth. And you have an entire race of people that was prevented from doing this. Arguably, some would argue until the 60s, some would argue until the 80s, right? And my video was to say, oh, and by the way, why don't we ever bring up the war on drugs and all these other things that happened after the Civil Rights Act passed? So you can't just gloss over the Homestead Act, where people were giving free property to migrate west, but Black people were excluded from that. Right, we can't look past the fact that they were excluded from getting the GI Bill, right? Redlining. So all these things were systemically created to disrupt Black people developing ownership. And I don't know if you can direct all of it, but when you look at the disparity of Black people and white people in wealth, right? And you're talking about $150,000 for the average white family is their net worth, to $15,000 for the average Black family is their net worth. That's a wild disparity. Can we trace all that back to the war on drugs? No. Can we trace all of that back to Jim Crow and slavery? No. But some of it can be. The social engineering of those laws definitely had a trickle down effect to these communities.
Do you believe that the systemic racism today plays a part and is holding people back to achieve their wildest dreams?
It depends on your definition of systemic racism. I think we may have different definitions of systemic racism. So you got to define what that means for me.
You define it. Go ahead.
So my definition of systemic racism would be the policies from yesterday, the policies that impacted my father-in-law, right, where he caught a petty drug offense and then had to go to jail for 5 years or some outlandish number, where today, because we've changed some of these laws, today he would have just gotten a slap on the wrist or treatment, right? I think those policies, yes, drastically impact generations today. And if you want to talk about specific racist laws that are current, we can talk about the 100-to-1 crack versus coke disparity, right? We could talk about the fact that Alabama didn't lift their ban on interracial marriage until the year 2000, right? That's recent, right? So that's a racist law, without a doubt, in our lifetime, right? The Fair Sentencing Act in 2010, that's a recent law. Mississippi didn't technically abolish slavery legally. You can look this up until 2013, right? Racist laws in our lifetime. There's a law from 10, 15, 20 years ago impact Black communities today? Absolutely. Absolutely, it does. So my definition of systemic racism will be a broader one in that there are systems and structures that have been corrupted by racist laws. Maybe not today. I can't point to one today. I would say qualified immunity definitely can disproportionately affect poor and people of color. Qualified immunity, I think, needs to be changed. That's something that's sketchy, but I can't point to a racist law today. But that doesn't mean that a law from 10, 15, 20 years ago doesn't impact our psyche as Americans and doesn't impact how people have access to wealth. I'll make this very tangible for you. Mm-hmm. Me and my wife are trying to buy our first home, right? All of our white friends, you know how they bought their first home?
How? Their parents had
because
money.
Their parents, right? And I'm not that I guess you could say that's anecdotal, but I could say, well, the average white family has $150,000 net worth. I'm an immigrant. I come from nothing. My wife's dad and mom were victims of the harsh sentencing of the war on drugs. Yeah. So guess who's not giving us a $100,000 down payment to get our first home, right? We have to defy the odds. We have to go above and beyond. And yes, we could still reach our wildest dreams, but you can't look at Oprah and say, because Oprah did it, anybody can get to Oprah's level. That's just not how it works. Again, that's survivorship bias.
In my opinion, I think that is a very, when it's talking about systemic racism, I don't believe in it today. I think that today anybody could do what they have to do. I think the one who chooses that is not even the government. It's not even you. I think it's far beyond you and me. It's far beyond the law. I think the one who chooses that is God. God is the one who decides who he sends to the villager in Africa and who he sends to the Wall Street banker as a child. You know, I mean, so God is the one that decided all these things, right? And so your friends that their parents have money or had money, God is the one that decided. And I can look at them, at your friends, for example, oh, look at them, the parents have money. No, that's just God decided that for them. They did certain things. They were in more advantageous situations and they had that. Now I have to put in my work and get mines, right? Because again, I'm the people here in the United States crying about systemic racism would a person, let me not even take it to Africa. A person in my country, Dominican Republic, will wish they had the opportunities that are given to the people here and would not be crying about systemic racism. I get it. And I don't think nobody disagrees. Nobody disagrees with the laws of yesteryears and the policies. I mean, whoever would disagree was that that there were laws on the books like Jim Crow's brought forth. And again, a lot of these policies and all of these racist policies were brought up by liberal-minded, democratic-minded government institutions like the Democratic Party, which is responsible for the KKK, Jim Crow laws. They did not want the slaves to get freed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Those are facts on the books. Nobody can deny those things. But to say today that I can't tell my child, right? My child is, I'm Dominican, they were born here, that I cannot tell my child who's a person, what they will call a person of color, that you cannot become the president of the United States if you want to. I think I'll be doing a disservice to my child telling him.
Yeah, I don't think it's about telling or limiting anybody. What I'm saying is, and you're right, ultimately God is sovereign. Ultimately God is in control. I'm with you there. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, I'm fine with the hand that I've been dealt because I'm way more resilient than my friends who got $100,000 gift, right? 100%. I have certain I have certain
the street smarts that they don't have.
right. And I have a certain degree of perseverance and resilience and all that kind of stuff. So I'm good. I'm good with where I'm at in life. So that's not to say that woe is me because I didn't get $100,000 down payment to buy a home in Southern California. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if we acknowledge. I think an acknowledgement of that is not the same as telling my son he can or can't do something, right? The conversation I have with my son every night is, hey, do you know that you're made in the image of God? That's you know that you're fearfully and wonderfully made. Do you know that you have limitless potential, right? So I think that you don't have to pin the two ideas against each other. One can acknowledge that. I'll make it very simple for you. I got a buddy, I got my nephew. My nephew is 16. He's 6'4", about to be 6'5". He's 160 pounds, right? Now, I'm 5'10.5". I'm Armenian, right? I'm Armenian, and there's never been an Armenian that's made it to the NBA. If you count the Kardashians, we've wiped out more careers in the NBA than we've started, right? So one, I'm 5'10", I'm Armenian, and I'm 35, right? My nephew is 16. He's a sophomore in high school.
Wow.
Okay, he's about to be a sophomore in high school. He's 6'4". So right now, today, I could ball up my nephew in basketball. I just can embarrass him, right? Right. But are we going to seriously sit here and say that he doesn't have an advantage over me in the grand scheme of the game of basketball, in the life, or the overall life? He has an advantage, period.
That's 100%.
Right? And so I think we do have to acknowledge advantages and say, listen, my buddy who comes from a family where the dad's a lawyer, then on his wife's side, multi-millionaire family, boom, they get $100,000 down payment to buy their first home, or whatever the number is, right? We just can't gloss over that and say, well, that's not no, it's an advantage. Ultimately, I'm okay that I don't get to go to the NBA, and my nephew could potentially, if he put in the work and he worked really, really, really hard, he could. But I think where we get delusional as Americans is you want to tell me that I can go to the NBA and be the next LeBron. No, man, it's not in the hands for me. It's not going to happen. Now, can I get nice at basketball?
Of course. Yeah. But then on that same token, right?
I'm nice. You know what I'm saying? Am I going to be LeBron?
Of course not. Of course not. But on that same token, right? You cannot say that you could. I'm not gonna feed you the lie. Oh yeah, you could make it to the NBA, right? Because that's just plain a lie. But on the same token, we cannot tell Americans also that you deserve to be in the NBA because certain thing.
100%.
We gotta be. There has
100%.
to be like a middle ground there. Let's get into this intermission. Ruslan, I was introduced to you thanks to the magic of the YouTube algorithm. Again, I saw your video, very interesting. Go to check out his channel. It's called Ruslan KD. But Ruslan, what is it that you do exactly? I got into your channel. You were doing a live. You were listening to some music. So tell the people, what do you do and where they could find you at?
Yeah, so I've been a full-time hip hop artist since 2015. I started out making music in the early 2000s. I put out a first like retail record in 2004. It took me a long time to figure out how to make money off of it. And then in 2015, I quit my job. I was working at my church before this, quit my job, started doing music professionally full-time from 2015. I've grossed six figures consistently since quitting my job. And so I run a little company called Kingstream ENT with my wife, kind of like a boutique label entertainment media company. Okay. And we do music. We do merchandise. This just came out yesterday. Okay. Yeshua's Dream. The company's called Kingstream. Nice. We do YouTube. We have a Patreon community, and the vision is to encourage, empower, inspire people to live God's dream. So here, I'll show you a quick little thing. This is our website. So this is one of my artists, John Keith. We just dropped some vinyl for him, limited edition, 25 pieces of signed vinyl. It's a new shirt that I got coming out called Politically Agnostic. And so yeah, KingsDreamENT.com or RuslanKD.com. Everything's on there. But yeah, I believe that if we live God's way, we will be in God's will. And I think living God's way also means loving people well and being empathetic and listening and trying to understand different perspectives. And that makes us outliers. And that's the vision of what I do.
Love it. And this again is too, what I could get is from very hard work, people, from very hard work. So go check him out. Go, bless him, buy some of his shirt. I like the one that he had on actually that I put on the thumbnail called Politically Agnostic. Some people
Politically Agnostic.
Yeah, I like that one. That one is good. I like that. That one is good. And I'm pretty sure he has more merch and stuff. Again, he has a YouTube channel. Go check him out. I'll put all the description. I'll put his link in the description or in the comments somewhere. You'll find it. But just put Ruslan KD on YouTube and you'll find him right away. Ruslan, let's continue here. Let's talk a little bit about opportunities. This to me, me personally, it gets to me because again, like I said, I'm from the hood. I've been in the hood my whole entire life. I've been here. I know what goes on here. I know who's who. I know who does what. I know just by looking at you, sizing you up. I know who you are basically, but you were mentioning that, and not only you, but a lot of people in general, they say this. Black and brown communities are not given the same opportunity as other Why do you say that? But before you answer, let me give you my story. I'm from the Dominican Republic. I've been here about 30 something years. When we landed into New York City, we came into the South Bronx in the early 90s, in 1990. And obviously, what we were talking about was happening in the South Bronx at that time. Crack, drugs everywhere, murder everywhere. One of my most vivid memories was when I came here to the place that we live, which was actually my whole family member, about 8 of us. Then my other two, I had 2 other aunts that lived with us, and one of them had 2 kids. So we had like 10, 11 people at a 1-bedroom apartment living together. We had that when we came as immigrants from the Dominican Republic. One of my vivid most memories that I looked out onto the street and there was a car on fire. There was a car on fire, yeah. And we came to live to almost right next to projects, and again, horrible area of crime in the early 1990s. There was a lot of murder in New York City at that time. My parents, I guess they started doing a little bit better economically, but they didn't know the language. They didn't know what was what and what was when. They moved and they found an apartment where we were able, it was probably like a 2-bedroom apartment, was a little bit more up north in the Bronx. And the area is where the 46th precinct is at. Back then, that precinct was called the Alamo. The Alamo was called because of how crazy that area was with drugs, with murder. Where I used to live at was a street called Creston Avenue and 183rd Street. On that corner, there was a week that they killed like 10 people on that corner alone, right? So we have my parents who are young, they have young children, and they're this crazy murder and drugs and all this. Meanwhile, my dad never, ever, ever decided to do what's wrong. Never decided to do what's wrong. As a matter of fact, he was constantly working. To this day, my father does not know English, but my father has been able to achieve the American dream, right? He's a black Dominican. The Dominicans, we come in all shades and colors. We have Dominicans that look like you, Dominicans that are black. We have and me in the middle. We have everything in Dominican Republic, right? My dad is a black Dominican. He has been a hard worker and has been able to buy a home, doesn't know the English language properly, but he made it happen. He actually took us from that situation where actually even a bullet went into one of the rooms in the house and decided to cross us right across the Lincoln Tunnel into New Jersey, into a like night and day, into a better area, a place called Union City, New Jersey, right across the Lincoln Tunnel. And he saw the problems. He still didn't give up, but he didn't choose. He made free will decision of choosing. Now, first of all, not to get involved, and then second, to take his family somewhere. And again, to this day, he has his own house. Thank God, he has been able to buy good cars. Where is the lack of opportunity? Because I don't see it.
Did you guys come out here as did you guys win the like a lottery thing, or were you guys as like refugees? Like, no, I came out here as a refugee, so I'm also from a different country. No, but what was
it was just normal immigration. I think it was I think it was my uncle had come over, and he was able to. It was like chain migration, right? My uncle came over, then he brought over my grandparents. Then my grandparents asked for 11 of their children, and then the children obviously asked for their spouses and their children, and we were able to come over to the United States, and that's how we made it here. But
yeah,
to say the question again, I don't think we were lacking opportunity. Wouldn't you say the same?
Yeah. So I think you if you look at studies of like immigrants. If you even look at studies of like in your guys' case, like your father who looks black, right? He's a black Dominican.
Yep.
If you look at guys from Jamaica, right? Immigrants from Jamaica, immigrants from parts of Africa, right? Ghana. Like I got a lot of friends from Ghana. I got a lot of friends from Nigeria. Those families tend to perform better than a lot of Americans. right? So a part of it might be that you got this perspective, this global perspective that's different, right? A part of it might be that you actually did win a type of lottery system to get selected to be the immigrant, right? This is definitely the case for a lot of Japanese immigrants and a lot of immigrants from Asia, right? Like the whole like Asians are good at math. Well, it's because we tend to get the best Asians, the best of the best that came over here. And then there was generationally cultures advanced, right? And so I think I relate to the immigrant story. I mean, I'm an immigrant, you know what I'm saying? And I'm a overachiever, defy the odds type of guy, right?
Yeah.
So I get it. I love it. I'm with you. I think that is across the board. If you, again, you compare people that were born here and you compare people that were born in other countries that come over here, regardless of their ethnicity, they tend to perform better across the board, right? Which to the conservative point of view can kind of dispel some of the colorism that a lot of people will push on the left, right? Well, it's colorism. The darker you are, the harder it is.
Yeah.
And but that when you look at, again, Jamaicans, when you look at Black Dominicans, they actually outperform a lot of whites, you know, in terms of their capabilities, or people from Ghana, people from Nigeria. So I think there's a lot of truth there. I think what you're describing is, one, a different mentality, two, culture, both parents in the household, and a different perspective. When you come as an immigrant, you have a different perspective versus someone who didn't win any type of lottery to be here, is coming from a fragmented home, whether that's the Democratic, you know, policies that expanded welfare or the Republican war on drugs. I don't know. Like, I can't point back to which individual family, but I think you're talking about two different degrees of social engineering. One is growing up without maybe the father, but with a broken family, with a different perspective. One with, hey, I remember communism, like for real. Like, people were freaking out about socialism. I remember lining up for food rations.
Wow.
As a kid, I remember we would get a tub of water and we had to share that. And I don't remember how, if it was for a day or a week, there would literally be a tub of water, and that was our water. And then the water was turned off. I remember that. Of course, my perspective is going to be different. Or let's take it to people who travel internationally, Black people from the South Side of Chicago, but they get to go on some trip and go see different parts of the world. Your perspective broadens. It opens up. Yeah. Right. So when I say there's a lack of opportunity, what I'm saying is, hey, I don't want equal output. I am not a socialist. I'm not a communist. I saw that Real Deal Holyfield. That's not lit. I don't think socialism is ever the solution. I don't want a lack of equal output. I want an equal opportunity. And that could be done. It doesn't have to be done through governmental programs, right? I want kids to go to better schools. I want kids to have access to better mentors. If they don't have fathers in their life, I want kids to have access to trade schools. I want kids to have access to technology. I want, right? Whether they're from the South Side of Chicago or they're from freaking the sunny side of, Hipsterville, Brooklyn, which is completely gentrified. Oh, yeah, I want kids to have the same opportunity, right? Okay. So that is my heart. And so I would say that there are still all kinds of things. So I'll give you an example. My buddy moved back here from Arizona, and this is kind of like how some of the covert racist laws work, right? They have a school, it's a charter school, right? So it's a public charter school. But what this school intentionally did is they got rid of their free lunch program, and they made it where every kid had to be dropped off by a parent. Well, who does that eliminate? That eliminates poor people, and usually people of color who are more likely to be poor in these areas, right? So now you have a charter school, which we know charter schools are going to outperform. Yeah. And you're removing certain kids from having access to that charter school. That kid didn't choose to be born into a poor family. That kid didn't choose to be born into a family without the father. That kid didn't choose to, whether his mom was 16 or 26 or 36. He didn't get to choose that, right? I want that kid to have an equal access to the education, to the information, and to the inspiration. I think if we have those three things, education, information, and inspiration, someone like you made it, comes back to the hood, tells you can make it, they give you the information, and then you have an opportunity to educate yourself through technology, learning how to code, engineer, music, video. So that I think that's my heart. So it's not that I think like there is an opportunity. Of course there's opportunity. It's that I think your environment really impacts you in a radical way. And I think sometimes conservatives will overlook how drastic an environment is, because if environments is if we're honest about it, we would then be like, man, if we're talking about, well, what about aborted Black babies, right? Well, what are you doing? Are you going into the hood and creating opportunities for when those babies grow up, right? Are you there doing charity in the South Side of Chicago, right? Because all my buddies who do charity in South Chicago usually are ministers. They're coming from a straight ministry standpoint, and I got friends from the South Side of Chicago. I'm just using that as a as a. So I don't know. Hopefully that's making sense. I don't have all the answers on this.
I know you don't. We're just having a conversation. I don't. The only person that has the answer is Jesus Christ, man. Me and you are just humans, and we are having a conversation to try to get to the bottom of these, at least some of these answers, or at least to make it a little bit more livable and address the root of the problem. I don't like to dwell too much on problems. I'm a solutions type of guy because and I'm pretty sure you are too. I mean, it just shows by the way you have lived your life. That you're a solutions type of guy, but sometimes there's a lot of complaining, and there's not. I mean, we God gave us free will. So going back to the situation of same hood, same people, my father decided to, first of all, not to get involved, to then take us out. I think it comes down to an issue of free will and of choices, even though. We're finishing it up here, by the way, guys. For the people that are here, please share, please like, do all that good stuff. Helps me a lot. Trying to make it grow, trying to make it to 1,000 subscribers here on the channel. Believe it or not, we don't have it yet, but we're making it, trying to make it happen. And to the issue of free will, let me read you this from, man, I forgot to put the story here or who I got this quote from, but look what it says here. You mentioned Freeway Ricky Ross. This is what happened. Back in the day, Freeway Ricky Ross would offer... No, not that. Let me read this. Between 1982 and 1989, federal prosecutors estimated that Ross bought and resold 3 tons of cocaine in $1980. His gross earnings were said to be in excess of $900 million with a profit nearly of $300. Converted to today's money, it will be $2.5 billion, right? That the man did, right? So he would have been a billionaire. Sadly he did it with that product, but he was a CEO, man. He will get the people that wanted to sell his stuff, he will give them for free $300 of cocaine, $300 for free, and that way they could sell it and then come back, and then he will then do it. I mean, actually, no, $100. Forgive me. He will give him $100 of cocaine for free, sell it, come back with $300, and then he will do business with them. I mean, he had the mind. He was a hustler. He did what he had to do. Sadly, again, he did it with that product, which was destroy so many. People.
Let me ask you this question, Valentine. I would venture off to say that if Freeway Ricky Ross was 25 in the year 2020, with how much technology, how much opportunity there is now because of technology, I would venture off to say that his life would have played out much differently than it did.
There's a big possibility about that. Yes, I will have to agree with you. I think
that the technology that we have access to today definitely levels the playing field, right? That everybody can get access to an iPhone or a smartphone. Everybody can stumble across a Gary Vee video on the Breakfast Club telling people how to flip, and then start flipping from a garage sale, move on to flipping Jordans, and then build their own business. And I know people that did that, like literally started flipping shoes, and now they make $500,000 a year with their own stores, selling shoes from the hood, gangsters, right? I think now that there has been a leveling of opportunity that was different in the 80s. And I think that definitely happens. And I would say, again, we just have to be careful to not fall into the survivorship bias, right?
Yeah.
Like you're coming from an angle where you're coming from both parents in the home. You guys are immigrants, right? And like your parents love Jesus. Like, man, those are some serious advantages that you had, right? Maybe that I didn't have, but that doesn't mean that right. That doesn't mean that I can't get it. I still got out here and got it and got moving and got shaking and made some stuff happen. So, but we also have to just be honest and sober about those things, right? We have to be honest and sober that there are different advantages. So this is my heart, just so we're talking about solutions. What I'm attempting to do is give people information, inspiration, and education, right? I just made a video yesterday, how to actually make money with music. And I went really deep on a 45-minute video on how I became a 6-figure entrepreneur of music. And I didn't charge for no weirdo masterclass, right?
Yeah. The course.
Yeah, but I'm seeing people that I personally mentor and disciple grow and become 6-figure as entrepreneurs in business, right? Like on a very tangible level. I don't want to just drop names. I'll send you some links to some people after the fact. And then I'm hiring people that I know I could develop and curate talent and give back, right? And I feel like that is a moral obligation as an entrepreneur to help and pass on the information, right? And then I have people in my life. I'm trying to gross to 7 figures. I have 7 figures entrepreneurs that pour into me and are helping me understand what it takes to get to that next level.
You're surrounding yourself by that good culture.
Yeah. And see, culture, right? Culture, that's the key word right there. Because whether you're talking about a corrupt gang culture or you're talking about being in an area where there's a corrupt police culture, or not coming from a family where that has a good godly culture that is teaching you these values. Maybe you're coming from a single parent home. Maybe you almost got aborted. Yeah. These are all things we don't control, man. We don't control a lot of these things. And yes, God is ultimately in control. But I think all I'm saying is, hey, let's be empathetic to the person who may be making bad decisions, who may be addicted, who may be on drugs, who may have. You don't know what that person went through. You don't know if he was molested as a child or raped or saw something really wild happen, right? And all I'm saying is, hey, there are clearly disparities. And we could talk about whose fault it is, or we could say, hey, let's love my neighbor the way I love myself. And sometimes that neighbor, man, he needs a firm word. He needs a rebuke. But sometimes that you just need to hear that neighbor and you need to love that neighbor. You see Jesus doing both. You see Jesus doing both.
100% both, and that's something that's sometimes conservatives they get blamed for not doing, which is the listening part, and then also being what you said, empathetic towards because we know as people that are religious, right, or are Christians, right, that we know that there's a component of free will to it, obviously, that people do decide, no matter whether they put you in the South Bronx, in LA, wherever, with the gangs and all that, you do decide to pick up that gun and commit that stick up. You do that. But there's also the component that if you weren't there and your uncle is not showing you to be a gangster and your friends are not showing you to be a gangster, that also influences who you are and what choices do you make. Raslan, I want to thank you so much. I think we had a great conversation. I think we need to have, a lot of people in general need to have these more of a conversation when you necessarily don't agree on everything you say, but you do come to an agreement on that you can respect other people's different ways of looking at life and still be able to shake people's hand and still be able to eat a meal together. We have lost that in America. I want to turn it off to you to close it up. You got 1 minute, 2 minutes to say whatever you want to your people, to whoever, to the world. Raslan, the stage is yours.
Thanks, Valentine. Hey, man, thanks for having me. This is cool. And I think conversations like this, where we could talk for an hour and we just discover, hey, we actually agree on way more stuff than we disagree on. And I think if we have more conversations as people in our real day-to-day life or as creators with people we may think we disagree with, when we actually get to the nitty-gritty of it, we find people tend to be more reasonable and relatable than we think we are. So thank you for having me, bro. I think ultimately my heart for everybody is, man, if you're willing to live God's way, you will always be in God's will. And living God's way is not easy. It is not easy to deny yourself and to pick up your cross daily and to, not perpetually chase pleasure. It's not easy. It's hard. And if it was easy, then everybody would do it, and everybody would be a millionaire, and everybody would, have the dream job. But it's not. And I think I would encourage you guys, man, look for God's ways in your personal life, in the little things. What are you consuming? What are you listening to? What are you eating? What are you thinking about? What do what are those little decisions that you think nobody sees? Those compound and those impact you, and you become who you are in those quiet places, the people you surround yourself with, the books that you're reading. And so keep consuming information like Valentine's show, because I feel like this is where, regardless of the partisan politics stuff, at least you can get some hope. At least you can get some inspiration. At least you can get some a word of life, and not something toxic and divisive, and something that's going to drive a further wedge between you and your fellow man.
It's insanity right now. The political atmosphere in the United States is really toxic, and everybody cannot wait till November 3rd is over.
Yeah, man.
Thank you so much, everybody. God bless. Godspeed me, Valentine. I am out. Raslan, thank you so much, my brother, man.